Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt. Welcome to this workshop notes video number 16. Now I'm going to start with my bandsaw, and this is the BS11 from Axminster. I've had it for a while now, absolutely love it. There is a video somewhere, you can find it I'm sure. And I thought I'd show you this, and this is a shoehorn, and this one's slightly on the long side, which makes it even easier still. You may have seen a video I made where I talked about my various planes, and there was one plane which I showed, which is this one, which is from Lee Valley, and it's a very small plane. It's got double curved surface, curved that way and curved that way, and it's used for scalloping out things. And that's what I used to get this part of the shoehorn done. I used my spoke shave on some of the outside detail, and I also used the jet bobbin sander as well, plus a bit of hand sanding of course. The way I cut this out is made from maple, and you can probably see this is the block I cut it from, and if I were to put this back into the block roughly as it came, you can see now what I did. Two cuts on the bandsaw, and this bottom end I left a little thicker, so I then had some meat to do this particular shape here. I'm sorry I've got no video to show you any of the process because I made it in a hurry because I wanted a shoehorn. It took me about an hour to make, and then afterwards my wife said, well, why on earth didn't you film it? Oops. Anyway, so at least I've told you about it, and that's thanks to the bandsaw. Whilst I'm on the subject of the bandsaw, let me just show you these. Well, you know already, if you've watched the bandsaw video I made, that it's pretty good at doing architectural veneers. It is very thin bits of wood. But when you get one as thin as this, and this is 2.5 millimeters in thickness, it's very difficult after you've sent it through the bandsaw to get the cut edge, the sawn edge, smooth. So what I did was I used the technique whereby after the piece came out of the bandsaw, and then it was probably about 3.5 millimeters in thickness, I could have made it slightly thinner, and I then double-sided sellotaped that to a thicker piece. I then measured the combination, how thick it was. I then sent it through the planing machine. Then after that I removed the thin piece from its backing piece. That was a little tricky, but it was not that difficult. And I then ended up with this rather nice thin veneer, which I'm going to be using for something very shortly. And really this is all possible because of the accuracy that you can cut these thin pieces on this bandsaw. Now the pair of chest of drawers I've been making recently are now finished, and they're about to be delivered to the customer tomorrow. And the last bit of detail I had to do was to finish the tops. And I'll show you that process now. The tops are made of a square of plywood, and around the edge of that plywood I put some oak at the same thickness as the plywood itself. Then it was veneered. Now I did intend to demonstrate a vacuum bag from Axminster to do this, but unfortunately at the last minute I discovered that the bag was slightly too small. I should have got the bigger one from them, but never mind. So I took the tops to a friend of mine who has a proper professional veneer press, and he very kindly put them through his rather nice sander first to get them absolutely flat, and then he found some rather nice veneer and put everything together using his veneer press. I then brought the tops back here and did the finishing touches. Now when veneer has been applied and the glue's dried, one wants to trim it all round before going on to the next stage of whatever process. And the edges where the grain is running parallel to the edge are easy. You just sort of bend it over and break off the veneer. and that's an easy process. But the edges where the grain is running at right angles to the edge, not so easy. One way of trimming it might be to use a router and just follow the edge under here and trim this off. But my overhang here is probably almost 2 centimetres. So what I'm doing is I'm putting a piece of wood which is almost the same as the gap between the upper and lower veneer under here. I'm then going to put on a straight edge that follows the line of the wood, and I'm going to then cut it with a craft knife. Now the key thing here is don't be too ambitious. Don't try and cut all the way through the veneer in one go. Take lots of cuts which do not go too deep at a time. Underneath here I've got a hardwood edge going all the way around my top, and that hardwood edge is there so that obviously it protects the edge of the veneer, but also it will be the edge which then gets moulded with the moulding cutter, which you'll see me use shortly. And that will leave a solid wood edge next to the veneer all the way around. Well, I think that's probably enough. I'll remove my piece of wood and now very carefully just push down, and this now comes away fairly easily, as you can see. And you can do the final clear up or even the initial clear up depending on how much overlap you've got, using a flush trim cutter on the router table. Now when you're handling veneered boards with an edge like this, which is with the grain and lots of bits sticking out, it's a good idea to wear some form of protective gloves because you can get some quite nasty, very fine splinters from the edge of veneer. And that's now super, ready for the next cut. Now for the decorative top, I'm using the same cutter that I used when I made that leather top desk a few years ago. And this came from Axminster. It's an absolutely beautiful cutter for a top. I've used a test piece of wood here, which is the same thickness as the tops that I've had veneered. And I've run it through in order to check whether I needed to adjust the right hand fence. Now as this goes across, if it takes a cut, which it obviously has to do, which is beyond the original edge that's going past it, when you get to the end of the cut where this edge then just leaves this fence here, if you've not made the adjustment to the fence, then there's a chance that you can end up with a little notch at the end of the cut. And if it were a planing machine, we'd probably call that snipe. Now, the way to check it is to run it through, first of all, with everything flush with the test piece, and then when you get that first bit of snipe, then make a judgment by how much you need to adjust this fence either forward or backwards. In this case, you're adjusting this fence that way because you're taking away more material, so it's got to go backwards. And I did that, and I found I had to do it by about 1 millimetre in this particular case. So we're now ready to cut our tops, and the main thing to remember is the tops have to go through with the underneath side upwards, because this is the finished top here. Right, we're all ready to go, and I'm going to do the end grains first. This is the underneath side, it says back, that's the top. That just needs a little bit of sanding now, and that will be super. Well, I've just finished putting the Osmo on everything. The tops are over here, and I don't know if you can see what I've done is I've put a couple of screws on the underside and some loops of string around those so that they can hang vertically, because no matter how hard you try, there'll always be a bit of floating dust in the workshop. So a flat surface is better allowed to be dried vertically. So that's what that is. Now, you may be wondering what this piece is here. Well, if you can imagine, this particular set of drawers is going to be sitting across a corner in a room. And I'll pretend that here it is across a corner. So you've got a wall here and a wall there. And this is going to sit behind like so. And so the top is below the height here, and so no one is going to see this at all. And the top is there to keep the dust off a Wi-Fi router, which is going to go there, and there might be a network storage device underneath here. And the reason it's in this particular location is that the telephone socket for the house is here. And so that's a way of hiding all of that kit, keeping the dust off. Now the tops are held on with 16 screws which come up from underneath. Now there are 16 because my tops are only 18 millimeters thick, and the plywood isn't especially strong. You often might be putting a screw into a void in plywood, and so I've used quite a few of them. And the reason being that when furniture like this is moved, people invariably lift it by the top, and so it's got to be joined on reasonably well. So I thought that 4 screws on each side was a way of absolutely making sure the top is going to stay on. Now these handles are from Hayfily, and I think they sort of blend in with the sort of semi-contemporary, semi-traditional style of these pieces. Well, I hope all that was useful. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.